Have you been struggling with the transition from anchor tonguing to normal tonguing, and maybe are even feeling a little bit reluctant to switch? Then this video is for you. My name is Josh Gu, and I'm taking my years of experience learning, teaching, and performing, and sharing all of my best clarinet and music tips so you can get more out of your practice, and most importantly, have fun. You can learn more about all of my many resources at quickstartclarinet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notified when I post new videos. So if you're watching this, you probably already have an idea of what anchor tonguing is versus sort of normal tonguing. It's kind of funny we don't really have a name for normal tonguing because it just is kind of the normal default way of doing it. But in case you don't, I'm going to very briefly go over it. And if you think you might be anchor tonguing, hopefully this will clarify if you are actually doing that or not. So normal tonguing is if this is the reed in your mouth and this is your tongue, the tongue sort of touches the tip of the reed and you get articulation. It's not the sharp edge of the reed that we're touching, but it's kind of the flat tip of the reed touching it with the tip of the tongue. Now, anchor tonguing is if you're anchoring the tip of your tongue somewhere and then hitting a different part of your tongue to the reed. And I've actually come across some interesting variations of anchor tonguing recently where it's not even the tongue hitting the reed at all. Sometimes the tongue's hitting the roof of the mouth, maybe the middle of the tongue. Sometimes the tongue is anchoring to the bottom lip and kind of pushing through the bottom lip to create some kind of articulation kind of thing. But anchor tonguing traditionally is instead of the tip of the tongue hitting the tip of the reed, the tip of the tongue anchors to the bottom lip or the bottom teeth, and then the middle of the tongue kind of hits the reed to articulate. Now, generally, we look at anchor tonguing as something that's bad, something that is a problem that needs to be fixed. But in this video, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the pros to anchor tonguing, which I think will help to clarify why you're struggling so much to change, and if you're a consistent anchor tonguer, why normal tonguing is not feeling good for you. So the benefit to anchor tonguing is that it anchors your tongue really well. One of the number one biggest mistakes in articulation is that the tongue is moving too much, or as we move the tongue, the embouchure also moves, or the air support changes. When you have the tongue anchored down to the bottom lip or the bottom teeth, it makes it so much easier to keep everything steady because you have that sort of anchor and steady tongue. So your tongue position is staying more steady, your embouchure is probably staying more steady because things feel sort of anchored and stabilized. And also I feel like the air tends to stay steadier too. And that may just be because the tongue position is remaining steady, so it's easy for the air to stay steady as the tongue position is remaining steady. But in any case, anchor tonguing generally actually sounds better than normal tonguing most of the time, especially if you aren't comfortable with touching the tip of your tongue to the tip of the reed. And that's the main quick thing that I want you to take away from this video, is that the reason why you're reluctant to switch is probably because normal tonguing sounds worse than anchor tonguing to you, and that's perfectly normal as you're getting the hang of normal tonguing. Now, the reason why it's still worth switching is because of the cons of anchor tonguing, which are primarily speed, sometimes maybe a little bit of crispness of staccato, potentially, depending on how you're doing it, especially if you're doing the variation where you're pushing your bottom lip into the reed. It's very hard to quickly dampen the reed vibrations without actually putting pressure onto the tip of the reed. But speed is the primary one, because when you're anchored here and trying to hit the tongue, hit the reed with the middle of your tongue, you can only go so fast. Even with my hand, it's hard to go very fast. Whereas if I'm doing the tip, it can go very, very, very quickly. So that's the reason why we kind of need to switch from anchor tonguing. But that's also a little bit of a sort of black and white thing. Like I was saying, how we sort of tend to kind of black and white think anchor tonguing is bad and anchor tonguing is a bad habit that needs to be fixed. I kind of have been working with some students and actually offering the idea that maybe sometimes you can anchor tongue and you should also get comfortable with tip of the tongue tonguing and do whichever one works best in whichever situation. If you have some delicate legato altissimo notes, anchor tonguing might actually be better than tip of the reed tonguing. If you're playing very fast, clear, crisp staccato notes, you're probably not going to be able to do that anchor tonguing, and you'll need sort of the normal tonguing. But I think it could be okay to be comfortable with both. If you're comfortable with both and can seamlessly transition and get the sound that you want out of the instrument, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, the final point that I want to make is that it's going to sound worse as you start to switch. So when you're anchor tonguing, you probably are pretty happy with how your anchor tonguing sounds, but a teacher has noticed that you're anchor tonguing, or you're trying to do something fast and aren't able to keep up with it with the anchor tonguing. So now you're kind of being forced to dabble with normal tonguing. At first, it's going to sound bad because, number one, you don't know how to touch the tip of your tongue to the tip of the reed. That's going to feel completely foreign and completely new. And number two, you're losing the biggest benefit of anchor tonguing, which is the stability of the tongue. So you're probably moving the tongue way too far, or dropping it down, or coming up, or doing something weird with the tongue that's getting the air out of position and making things sound bad. So the main takeaway I want you to have from this video is, if you're an anchor tonguer and you're starting to dabble with the sort of normal tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed articulation, realize it's going to sound bad at first. Trust that it's not because normal tonguing is worse than anchor tonguing. There's tons of great players and even average players who can make tip of the tongue articulation sound just as good as anchor tonguing. It's a matter of you getting used to it and you getting familiar with how it feels to touch the tongue to the reed, and how it feels to keep the air support going and the embouchure steady and the tongue position in place while you have the tongue freely moving around in the mouth rather than anchored to a bottom lip where it feels more secure and more stable. Now, if you'd like much more in-depth ideas on articulation, then check out this video that I have. There's lots of thorough explanation and even drawings of how the tongue should be moving in the mouth and how to work on articulation. But hopefully this quick tip just gives you some ideas and some encouragement as you're maybe dabbling, switching from anchor tonguing. And hopefully it's clear why normal tonguing sounds worse for you for now, and hopefully gives you a little encouragement to stick with the process, keep getting used to finding stability to the tongue motion without actually having it anchored, so that you can articulate fast and articulate really clear, crisp staccato as the music calls for it. So thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. And last but not least, a huge heartfelt thank you to the Dennersons. This is like the Quick Start Clarinet family who supports the channel and helps to make everything that I do possible. If you would like to support the channel and get some awesome rewards in return, where we can work one-on-one over video and you can have my full support moving forward on your clarinet journey, then go to quickstartclarinet.com/supporter.